When you think of World War I, what comes to mind? Trench warfare, muddy fields, maybe some black and white photos of somber-looking soldiers. But what if I told you the history you learned in school barely scratches the surface? The reality of the Great War was stranger, more complex, and honestly, way more fascinating than most textbooks let on. Today, we read diving deep into the untold stories and bizarre facts of World War I that you definitely didn't learn in class. Let's start with something you might not expect: plastic surgery. We take it for granted today, but its modern foundations were laid in the trenches. A surgeon named Harold Gillies, a New Zealander working with the British Army, was horrified by the devastating facial injuries soldiers were suffering. We're talking about faces literally shattered by bullets and shrapnel. Gillies pioneered new techniques to reconstruct jaws, noses, and entire faces. He developed the tube pedicle, a method of grafting skin that kept the tissue alive by maintaining its own blood supply. He essentially built new faces for thousands of men, giving them a chance at a normal life. His work was so revolutionary that it is still the basis for many plastic and reconstructive procedures performed today. It's a stark reminder that even amidst unimaginable destruction, human ingenuity and compassion can create something truly life-changing. Now, let's talk about the animals of war. We've all heard of horses and carrier pigeons, right? But the animal kingdom's involvement was much broader and, frankly, pretty wild. The British Army used over 100,000 pigeons to carry messages, and they were incredibly effective. One pigeon, named Cher Ami, saved an entire American battalion by delivering a message despite being shot through the chest, blinded in one eye, and having a leg nearly severed. But it gets weirder. Glowworms were used as a source of light. Soldiers would collect them in jars to read maps and letters in the dark of the trenches, providing a faint, but crucial, glimmer of light that wouldn't attract enemy fire. And then there were the slugs. It was discovered that slugs are extremely sensitive to mustard gas and would show signs of distress long before humans could detect it. They became an early, slimy, and surprisingly effective gas detection system for the troops. Speaking of strange jobs, have you ever heard of the listeners? Before radar was a thing, detecting incoming enemy aircraft was a huge challenge. The solution was giant ears. Seriously, acoustic locators were massive, elaborate contraptions designed to amplify the faint sound of airplane engines from miles away. Soldiers, known as listeners, would sit with these giant metal horns strapped to their heads, trying to pinpoint the direction and altitude of approaching planes. It was a bizarre blend of sci-fi and steampunk, a desperate attempt to use low-tech means to combat a high-tech threat. Imagine sitting in total silence, your entire job depending on catching the faintest hum in the distance. It was a nerve-wracking and surreal role in the machinery of war. And the war wasn't just fought on the battlefield. It was fought in the minds of the public through one of the most extensive propaganda campaigns in history. Governments on all sides knew they had to keep morale high and justify the immense human cost. This led to some creative, and sometimes downright dishonest, storytelling. The famous Lord Kitchener wants you poster in Britain, with his pointing finger and stern gaze, is just the tip of the iceberg. There were stories demonizing the enemy, like the infamous tales of German soldiers committing unspeakable atrocities in Belgium, many of which were exaggerated or completely fabricated to fuel anti-German sentiment. Food was also a weapon. The Germans called the British naval blockade the Hunger Blockade, as it led to widespread starvation among their civilian population. in response, Germany developed ersatz or substitute products for everything from coffee made of acorns to sausages made with breadcrumbs and water. The war on the home front, the war for hearts and minds, was just as intense as the one in the trenches. Let's talk about a silent, invisible killer that claimed more lives than the war itself, the 1918 flu pandemic. Often called the Spanish flu, it's called that not because it started in Spain, but because Spain, being a neutral country, had a free press that reported on it extensively, while warring nations suppressed news of the outbreak to avoid damaging morale. This flu was devastating. It spread like wildfire through the packed military camps and trenches and was carried home by returning soldiers, infecting an estimated third of the world's population. Unlike typical flu strains that are most dangerous to the very young and very old, this one was unusually lethal for healthy young adults, the exact demographic of the soldiers. It's estimated that the Spanish flu killed between 50 and 100 million people worldwide, far more than the 20 million who died in the war itself. It was a global tragedy that unfolded in the shadow of the war, a pandemic accelerated and exacerbated by the global conflict. Even the end of the war wasn't the neat and tidy conclusion we often imagine. The armistice was signed at 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918, but the fighting didn't just stop on a dime. The news of the ceasefire was communicated to the front lines, but it took time to reach everyone. In the hours between the signing of the armistice and its official start time, fighting continued, and thousands more men were killed or wounded. Some commanders allegedly wanted to capture last-minute territory or simply prove a final point. The last American soldier to die in the war, Henry Gunther, was killed just 1 minute before the ceasefire at 10:59 a.m. while charging a German machine gun nest. His death is a tragic symbol of the senselessness that continued right up to the very last second. And what about the cultural impact? The war completely reshaped society. Before 1914, many European nations were led by monarchies and aristocracies that had ruled for centuries. By 1918, the German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman empires had all collapsed. The world map was redrawn. But the changes went deeper. With millions of men away at war, women stepped into roles they had never been allowed to fill before. They worked in factories, on farms, and as nurses on the front lines. This mass mobilization of women was a huge catalyst for the women's suffrage movement. In many countries, including Britain, Germany, and the United States, women gained the right to vote in the years immediately following the war. The social order was permanently altered. The war also had a profound effect on art and literature. The lost generation of writers like Hemingway and Fitzgerald expressed a deep sense of disillusionment and cynicism, a feeling that the old certainties and values had died in the trenches. Another weird fact: the rise of the trench coat. Think about it, the name says it all. This iconic piece of fashion was literally born in the trenches of World War I. British officers needed a more practical and waterproof alternative to their heavy wool greatcoats. Thomas Burberry designed a coat made from a durable, water-resistant fabric called gabardine, complete with features like D-rings for attaching map cases and grenades, and a storm flap for extra protection. It was functional military gear that, after the war, became a timeless symbol of style and sophistication, worn by everyone from Hollywood detectives to fashion models. Who knew your stylish coat had such grim origins? So, World War I wasn't just a simple story of good versus evil or a line drawn in the mud. It was a chaotic, bizarre, and world-altering event filled with incredible stories of innovation, sacrifice, and strangeness, From the birth of plastic surgery and the secret lives of slugs to the surreal acoustic listeners and the fashion legacy of the trench coat. The real history is far richer and more surprising than what you'll find in a textbook. It shows us that history is not just a collection of dates and battles. It's a messy, complicated, and deeply human story. And understanding these lesser-known details gives us a much fuller picture of how the Great War truly shaped the world we live in today. Thanks for watching. If you found these stories as fascinating as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the history they didn't teach you in school. Let me know in the comments which of these facts surprised you the most. See you next time.